Swept away, 8 dead and dozens missing. Queensland counts the tragic cost of nature's fury. After the deluge, as Toowoomba reels from the flood disaster, concern switched to Ipswich and Brisbane. Close call, Gympie spared major damage as its flood peak recedes. And bushfire threat, homes destroyed and residents evacuated south of Perth. Hello and welcome to ABC News across Australia. I'm Nicole Chettle. Authorities in Queensland are grappling with the worst natural disaster in the state's history. The Lockyer Valley at the foot of the Great Dividing Range near Toowoomba has been ravaged by floodwaters, and the situation's nearly as bad in other parts of the state's southeast. The 7-metre wall of water that engulfed Toowoomba and nearby towns in the valley exacted a terrible toll. At least 8 people are confirmed dead, 72 are missing, and the state's Premier, Anna Bligh, says she expects those figures to rise. Among the dead are a woman and a boy swept away in the torrent that cut through the centre of Toowoomba. A man and a boy were caught in the rising waters at Murphy's Creek further downstream. As the deluge coursed down the Lockyer Valley, residents scrambled to their rooftops. Many waited for rescue overnight. At Grantham, 30 kilometres east of Toowoomba, the flood damage is described as devastating. Authorities at Ipswich are now bracing for a flood peak several metres above the level that was anticipated. It's still raining heavily in the Brisbane River catchment, and up to 30 suburbs in the city are now on flood alert. Karen Berkman begins our coverage.
This is how Grantham looked this morning, smashed to smithereens by an irresistible force, water rushing downhill through the Lockyer Valley and claiming every small town in its path. There have been unconfirmed reports that bodies have been found in some of the houses, and police expect the death toll to rise. At least half a dozen houses were shifted off their stumps and some were carried away by the raging river. Overnight, 45 people were rescued from rooftops, but the helicopters were grounded by fog this morning.
The key focus at the moment, of course, is to try and ensure that we get all those people who are currently in danger. The weather is quite atrocious in the region, and that's causing some difficulties.
Further downstream, the town of Laidley is filling up fast.
Like a river going down the main street. It's just, and it's really going really fast.
The Queensland Premier looked shaken when she briefed the media after a late-night meeting at Queensland's Emergency Management Headquarters.
The flood crisis in Queensland has deepened seriously over the past several hours. We now have serious flooding returned to the southwest of our state and returned with a vengeance.
There was sheer savagery in the wall of water that swept through Toowoomba yesterday afternoon without warning, catching people in the central business district. 2 people were drowned when their car was washed away. Law-abiding pedestrians became the subject of dangerous rescues.
This has been a terrible day. The early reports would indicate that what hit Toowoomba could perhaps best be described as an inland instant tsunami.
Overnight, police have confirmed that no bodies have been found in the dozens of cars submerged, smashed and tossed around the city. Locals are still trying to come to terms with what happened.
There were barrels floating around the car park. There were a couple of big trucks there and they were floating around, and anything that was let loose, the bins and the industrial bins, all of them were floating around in the water.
Now serious trouble is heading downstream to the major population centres of Brisbane and Ipswich. All the floodgates are open at Wivenhoe Dam, built after the 1974 floods to spare Brisbane another such catastrophe. But low-lying areas of the city are already being prepared for evacuation. In Dalby, 165 people are in evacuation centres again, the river rising even higher than its peak on December 27, cutting the town in half. In nearby Chinchilla, the water's still coming up.
This is without doubt our darkest hour of the last fortnight.
And heavy rain continues. Karen Berkman, ABC News.
Many of the accounts from the flood zone mention the astonishing speed of the floodwaters. Today, rescue helicopters began lifting victims out, and the pace of the operation has picked up, taking advantage of badly needed breaks in the weather. The ABC's Paul Lockyer flew over Grantham this morning.
This is what's left of the hotel in Grantham. This gives you an idea of the sheer destruction of that wall of water that came down from Toowoomba. And this is replicated all up and down this street, all across this small town. This what was a beautiful small rural town at the bottom of the slopes coming down from Toowoomba. But what happened here yesterday was that we saw that enormous flash flood through the main street of Toowoomba, carrying cars like matchbox toys and dumping them at the end of the street. People really clinging to light poles, to trees, to each other to try to save their lives. That wall of water came down here. It was up to 7 or 8 metres high by the time it reached Grantham, and it just swept through here. The destruction here is probably akin to Cyclone Tracy in Darwin. So immense has this destruction been. Not by the force of the wind, but by the force of the water. Unbelievable scenes. House after house after house, and we've heard from survivors here who were on the rooftop of that pub watching the cars float by. And over there in the railway yard, we see all the cars parked because people went to work as usual. There's a lot of cars in that car park, and they don't know quite where all the people are. They haven't accounted for them yet. We know that there are 7 dead. We know that 40 people were plucked from rooftops around here and right through the Lockyer Valley, but we know that there are still scores missing still. And all the time the rain keeps coming, and this is going to hamper the rescue and recovery efforts all day here. The disaster is far from over from Queensland. There'll be heavy rain right through southeastern Queensland today, and the focus obviously should be on the Lockyer Valley today, but by tomorrow it moves on to Brisbane itself, because there'll be high tides there holding back these floodwaters, and homes in Brisbane will be at risk. On the other side of the Great Divide, just beyond Toowoomba, there are towns like Dalby, Chinchilla and Condamine, which have been through flood crisis, recovered, but the waters are rising again. And in the days to come, it'll be the northern coast of New South Wales that comes at risk. This disaster is far from over. This is the greatest flood that has certainly hit Queensland. It may be the greatest flood that has ever hit Australia, and certainly the damage here will be the greatest flood damage here ever incurred by this nation.
And that was Paul Lockyer in Grantham. Toowoomba residents are still